Hey everybody, Quantum here, and it is Saturday, April the 13th, 2024. We are 1 week out from the store championships, so I figured I would do a market watch to kind of see how the market has settled because there's not really going to be too many more price changes. People should know what they're playing at this point, practicing with it, and the prices should be relatively settled. Is it a good time to get what you need if you're looking to finish off your deck or for building out your collection? Let's go ahead and take a look at some of the market trends from the meta results over the past couple of weeks. There are some big tournaments happening this particular weekend that will likely slightly impact things, but probably not too much because, like I said, people know what the meta is and they probably already have everything they need in order to build the deck they want for the store championship. So to start things off, Curse Merfolk, I've talked about this for many weeks when this card was $1.50, and I told you guys this card would be going up because I've already explained many times why this card is so good. In the Emerald decks, this card is the staple one drop no matter what version of Emerald you're playing usually. It is very good value. Again, I've already explained it many times. You can go back to previous market watches or look at any of my Emerald videos that I've posted with gameplay and or deck profiles to explain why this is good. But this card is essentially on buyout mode, understandable since people who are playing Emerald for the store championships are buying this. Kind of wild that you're paying like $4 almost a copy for one of these because like I said, there was a time when this was $1.50 and I said I would be picking up extra copies to trade and or sell if I was looking to flip them at that price because prediction came true, like they've been going up. So moving on to the next one, the Queen's Castle, stabilizing at around five-ish dollars. This card, I think if you don't have your playset, you definitely want it because this is a card that probably just gets better over time, I think. It's making its way back into Ruby Amethyst. It's making its way into, or it is being played in Emerald Amethyst, the two most popular decks. It's played sometimes in Amethyst Steel, but Amethyst continually being the strongest color in the game, I think, along with Steel. And this card just represents tremendous value. 7 toughness, so it survives Maui. Just Maui being dropped and attacking it. 2 lore every turn, very powerful. Cost 4, it is inkable, only 1 to move. This card is just tremendous value overall. Again, may not always be played in every Amethyst combination or at times based on how the meta evolves, but I just think that this card is very good at $5 a rare, a playset for $20. I wouldn't hesitate to pull the trigger personally. The next card I want to talk about is Bare Necessities, and I said again in one of my market watches that under $1, this card represents tremendous value. For those of you that play MTG, I'm an old school head. I played back in like 2005, 2006. What comes to mind is Duress, right? From MTG, and that card was very good back in the day. Not sure about today, probably not. It's probably a little too slow, but this card is very relevant for Amber Steel in particular because that's really the only Amber deck that's doing anything right now. Like Amber, Ruby, Mufasa, not really a thing. But the reason why this is so important is because in your worst matchups, like Sapphire Steel, Sapphire Ruby, this card rips the Fishbone Quill. So in those matchups, you aggressively mulligan for this card, and it helps you potentially outplay the Sapphire matchups where Amber Steel really struggles. But if Amber becomes paired with anything else in the future, this card I think is just really a staple for the foreseeable future. So I know I have my playset. I actually ended up buying 3 foils, so like less than $5 each. Can't really go wrong in my opinion. So while this card is still only less than $2, I think it represents good value because this card is just. It's just really, really good, right? Like if you think Ursula Deceiver is good to rip a song, like this card is just even better. It's a song, and it rips more than just a song. It rips locations, items, songs, actions. Very, very good in my opinion. Next card we got to talk about is Madam Mim Fox. I've talked about this many times already as well, where I said that I think this card is like literally the best Amethyst card. I don't know about that anymore. Maybe like the Queen's Castle is pushing up there, but this card still represents tremendous value, and clearly people are reacting. Kind of wild to see the foil one going for $15. I remember arguing with somebody buying it for $11, and I wanted to pay $10. Thankfully, I did end up getting my 4 foil copies at around less than $10 each almost. But seeing the normal one going for almost $6 USD is kind of insane when this card used to be like $2 to $3, I think. But yeah, I mean, if you don't have your playset of Mim Foxes, I don't know what you're doing. This card is also in the starter deck, I believe, for Rise of the Floodborn. So, it's a really good card. No, don't get me wrong. But the fact that it's being played in Emerald Amethyst, it's played in any Amethyst deck, honestly. Ruby Amethyst, Amethyst Steel. Like, it's a staple Amethyst card because, like I said, it just represents tremendous value. Ink, Bounce, which is usually a benefit, not a detriment. Can cause a detriment sometimes for tempo loss, but not really. An overstated 4/3 body with Rush. Like, the card is insane. Over time, as this card becomes harder and harder to find, as it rotates out of printing, it's just going to be better and better because I don't really see this getting power crept, because I really do think that this is flawed card design, because this card is way too powerful for what it does. So I doubt this gets power crept anytime soon. And again, that's just my own personal take on it. Strength of a Raging Fire. I remember when people started dumping these because they thought it wasn't good, and I'm like, this card, it will always be good because, first of all, Amber Steel Song will likely always play it because they go wide on their boards usually. And, other Steel decks, just having the versatility to sing a song, on a 3-cost character that deals potentially 3+ damage is really, really strong. If you watch my Amethyst Steel video where I used this, I outed an Ursula Power Hungry, the 8 toughness character, which usually is an auto win against Steel, because I was able to deal 5 damage to it with this. And I finished it off with something else. I should have finished it off with a Robin Hood, but I didn't. I don't think I ended up doing that. But this card and any Steel deck is potentially viable. I even played this, testing it in Sapphire Steel, and it was decent, but because Sapphire Steel doesn't really go too wide in the beginning, it doesn't really have that much of application because this is mostly an anti-aggro card. But as you can see, the card is skyrocketing in price. After people thought that it wasn't going to be good, they thought Zeus was going to replace it. And Zeus is definitely a great card, but the fact that it's 4 and uninkable really does not synergize with Amber Steel Song that well. And like I said, this card being inkable, being a song, being 3 costs, so Cinderella can sing it, etc., makes it very relevant. People are kind of catching on, and they are picking it up. $8 for a foil copy doesn't actually seem too bad. $5.50 for a non-foil does seem kind of expensive, but I picked up 3 foils at around $8 Canadian. So, I mean, this is what, $10 Canadian, $10, $11 Canadian. So it's a little bit higher. If I was looking for foil copies, if I wanted my last foil one, I might opt to pick it up before it goes up a little bit more. But again, we'll see what happens in set 4. I don't think that this card gets power crept directly anytime soon. Yeah, there will be more Steel removal item, songs, for sure, in set 4. What we get, will it outplace or replace this? I guess we'll have to wait and see, but we saw that Zeus didn't end up fulfilling that. Morph is on the decline. This card has really fallen out of favor. At $1.52, less than $1 even, personally, I would be picking up extra copies. I think this card is pretty good still, and it will get better over time. It's not being played right now in the format because the Emerald Steel deck has kind of shifted away from the Bucky Morph. The discard, the preferred discard build is kind of the one that Speci actually ended up popularizing. So props to him actually for being a streamer who's really good at the game and actually pioneering some innovation there. But yeah, you're not really seeing this played in anything else, mainly because Emerald isn't played in anything else. It's Emerald Steel or it's Emerald Amethyst, and the Emerald Amethyst build is very low to the ground. They don't even play shift Floodborn targets. They might play Yzma, but only as a 2 of, so you're not Yzmaing over a Morph, right? So this card doesn't have any real value at the moment in Emerald since it's not paired with anything else. But I do think the Emerald Steel pairing, will continue to be very strong into the future just because it has such a solid base. And under $1, if you don't have these, I mean, I paid $5 for mine. So clearly I overpaid, but I'm not upset about it because, like I said, I think that this card does get better over time. Pridelands. I was going to make a video last week about this card because Zan, who, really good player, won the AK, recently hit #1 on the Pixelborn Hardcore leaderboard, I believe. He actually played this in the Thea Bestie tournament 2 weeks ago. And there's a lot of application with this card. Does it, it's gonna spike for sure a little bit, but it probably doesn't go over $3 to be honest on market price. The reason why this card is very good, and maybe I won't explain this in this video because it'll get too long. I'll do an Amber Steel Song video soon, by the way. But this card is basically a flute and a lantern kind of in one, but it requires some setup in order for it to do that. In the mirror match, this card is very good, and the reason why this is favored over lanterns and flutes is because there's a lot of item hate going around right now. A lot of people are taking back in Benjas, which again, if you watch my Sapphire Steel video, I talked about putting Benjas back into that deck, and you're seeing that happen now, and other Steel variants as well, like Amber Steel is playing Benjas, etc. And those hit the lanterns and the flutes. Whereas this card, it comes down, especially on 2, if you move the 1-drop Simba, the Steel one that allows you to draw and discard, you move that here, you get the reduction of 1 less for every character, which, is basically a lantern, and your characters get +2. Plus, it gains you 1 lore at the start of every turn, which is basically what a flute does. So, with the right setup, this card is a flute and a lantern. I do think lanterns are probably still a little better, in my opinion, but in certain scenarios and in certain matchups, the Prideland definitely is just a powerhouse. It does have the 7 toughness, which means it survives the Maui on drop, but between a crab and a fox, it still gets outed. So against Ruby Amethyst, I think this card is probably a little weaker. But though obviously because Ruby Amethyst has no item removal, so Lantern would be stronger in that case, whereas, they have ways to out locations very easily with their rush and boosting characters. So there is that to consider. Merlin Rabbit also going up. Again, just being played in every Amethyst build. Amethyst Steel, Amethyst Ruby, Amethyst Emerald. Like, it's a staple card. People thought maybe, the Genie or something from this set from Into the Inklands would replace Merlin. That was not the case. So, people are realizing that they need this if they don't have it yet. And as a result, it's going up. Again, another starter deck card, but as Rise of the Floodborn cards become harder to find, this card likely just continues to go up in price. Flynn Rider from the first chapter really putting in some increase here. You can see that it's definitely on the rise. The foil version has definitely picked up in price quite a bit. I was surprised to see this jump from like $4 Canadian to like almost $9. But yeah, I guess if you don't have your uncommon playset, if you're playing Emerald, it seems like this card is one of the preferred 2-drops along with the Ursula Deceiver. But again, I've already talked about how Ursula Deceiver probably wants to be played a little bit later when you want to rip a particular song out of the opponent's hand. But again, just getting the advantage off of Deceiver or Flynn Rider is always good. Quest for 2, discard a card or force a removal at some point. So it likely always trades 1-for-1 in the same vein as Cursed Merfolk. Ursula Deceiver slightly trickling back up, it looks like, but it's fairly stable, similar to how it was last week at around 33. Actually, it's been going up, yeah. Probably, yeah, on a little bit of a buyout mode, maybe. No, not really, actually. Again, the Emerald Amethyst, Emerald Steel are where you're seeing this card being played. Again, with Emerald Amethyst, like, all you need to do is sing Friends once with this card, and assuming you're not up against the Steel deck, like, that's just enough to win you the game in any other matchup. The reason why Steel gives us trouble is because, obviously, they can out this card with their Steel songs, but also because of A Whole New World. But this interaction between this and Friends on the other side is just way too strong, because I've already talked about this in my Emerald Amethyst video. All you need to really do is just refill your hand so you can continue to drop aggro threats, and that's just enough to push for game for these low-to-the-ground decks, and Emerald Amethyst definitely does that very well because it has this card and Friends on the other side. So this card likely trickling back up. I think in my last Market Watch I said, keep an eye on it. I wouldn't hesitate at paying $30 a copy for this. I paid 37 Canadian for mine, which is around $30 USD probably. Yeah, because like I said, this card, in my opinion, just gets better over time. I don't really see it getting power crept anytime soon. A Whole New World continues to kind of be stabilized at around the $16, $17 mark USD. Very interesting. Again, a first chapter card, so it has that first chapter premium. I think this card just continues to stabilize. I don't remember if I talked about this in my last Market Watch, but because I did record a couple of Market Watches, but as you probably heard in the background, my newborn baby was crying, so I had to not post them because there was a lot of background noise. Thankfully, she she calmed down a little bit there. My wife probably picked her up, but regardless, the reason why I wanted to talk about this is because I said in either the last Market Watch or the one I was going to post that this card likely gets banned if there is ever a ban list. If there's never a ban list, obviously it doesn't matter, but with this card being probably the most broken card in the game, in my opinion, I think it's the first card to get banned and or limited, and if that does happen, obviously the value will tank. Still has collectability factor. It is a first chapter card. It is an iconic card. It is a meta-defining card for the first 3 sets of this game. And like I said, I don't want to say it's the best card in the game, but it's definitely the most broken card in the game because what you can potentially pull off with this card in certain Steel builds is just ridiculous. So keep an eye on it. If you don't have your playset, if you're looking at them, just be a little wary that if there is ever a ban or limited list introduced, that card I think is definitely on the chopping block. With Amber Steel Song picking up in popularity, again, the only real Amber deck that has any play right now, Ariels are slightly picking up in price as people may be wanting to play this for their store championships. At around $3 a copy, I would definitely not hesitate to pick up Ariels because, again, I don't see this getting power crept. It will eventually, but maybe not in the next set, I don't think. As again, more songs come out, this card just gets better over time. Do you end up playing more songs in an Amber Steel Song deck? I don't necessarily know, but as you dig for more powerful songs, it definitely could become relevant. You see Amber Steel Song currently sitting on something like 20 songs or more, right? So there's a lot of utility with this card, and that's why it's so strong. It drops, it replaces itself, it's Sing or 5, which means you get so much tempo off of casting your song for free. That's why Amber Steel Song is so good. Prince John really only played in the Emerald Steel version, but it's really come down over its high. Again, if you don't have your playset, it might be worth picking up at around $2 a copy because, again, this card, for any discard build, looks to be a staple. We tried discard without Prince John using only the Bucky. It didn't really work. They ended up going back to the Prince John, and that one seems to have the most success. Grab Your Swords, kind of falling off a little bit. I think that this card is worth picking up at around $2, $2.50, maybe $3 ish if you don't have your playset yet. A lot of steel builds are actually cutting this card, which I personally think is a mistake. I think this card still has a lot of value. Will it get power corrupt in the next set? Hard to say. I don't necessarily think it will, but it is going to be three sets old at that point, right? When the set 4 comes out, so maybe it does get power corrupt. But the shift 5 or shift into a 5 cost character, sing this on turn like 3 or whatever, and wipe out an aggro board is very valuable still. In certain steel applications, singing this and dealing 2 damage to everything and then using your characters to mop up whatever you need to is also valuable. So I think that this card should be played in 3-ofs in the steel builds that are lower to the ground, like Amber Steel Song, Amethyst Steel Aggro, etc., or mid-range, not aggro necessarily. So yeah, I think this card is good value for where it's at, since it's probably at one of its lowest points. Cinderella has been picking up in price just a little bit. Is it worth $3.50? I think so. Does this card go up over time? I personally think it does, because this card is very, very good. And like I keep saying, as you get more songs coming out, this card just gets better over time. So it is at one of its lowest points still. I definitely wouldn't hesitate at picking them up. I picked mine up for 12. I think I mentioned that many times already on Market Watches. Be Prepared, kind of stabilizing. This card now kind of seen as a liability a little bit because of all of the hand disruption that is now in the game with Bare Necessities and Ursula Deceiver. It does have a first chapter premium, of course. It is still a very good card. This card is not broken though, by any means, in my opinion. It may get broken and become bannable or limitedable over time as we get more powerful interactions. But the real thing that would put this card over the top is if there was a really good ruby or amethyst shift package that you could sing this early with, right? Because one of the best applications with this card is in the Sapphire Ruby deck, where you can ramp with Fishbone Quill and drop this a little early and wipe out the board, and then Sapphire Ruby just develops threat after threat after threat, removal after removal, and that's how they usually win the game. So if you do get something where this ink pairing with Ruby, like either within Ruby itself or Ruby Amethyst or something, gets a really good shift to shift out something on turn 5, that's a 7 cost, and you sing this, that's really, really strong. Robin Hood continues to stabilize itself at around this $45 mark, which is quite interesting. This card is absolutely insane. I don't know what to tell you guys. I called out probably trying to pick these up at around $20, $25, and I told you guys this was going to go up. This was around this point here as it was going up, and I said it was still good value, and then it continued to go up. Then it went back down, which is interesting, but now it's going back up because even the Sapphire Steel builds, the one that recently won the big Poland event, actually ended up playing this as well, and it was very, very strong. It won the event, I believe. So almost every steel deck can play Robin Hood. It's just that good. Sapphire Steel may not play it, but like I said, the one that won Poland, the Sapphire Steel build, ended up playing this, and it was the difference maker, right, in that top 8. So very, very good card. Tinkerbell looks to be stable at around 12. I think it's going back up a little bit. Yeah, I mean, this card I think eventually falls out of the format because unless you get another good small shift Tink target, this card just doesn't have the same impact, in my opinion, because dropping it on 6 or maybe one turn earlier with Fishbone Quill is just not high impact. You need to be able to shift this in order to get the real value off of it. Either shift Sing, right, to deal 3 damage with the Grab Your Swords, or shift and then take out a character. So then you shift, deal 1 damage to everything, you attack into a character, take it out, then deal 2 damage to something else, take that out. So you deal 1 damage to everything and take out 2 characters. That's the real value of this card. So until you get another good shift Tink target, I don't think that this card is really going to be all that meta. It's still play, don't get me wrong, but you're seeing some lists actually experiment with cutting this card and having success. Maui continues to be the most expensive rare in the game, I believe. It's kind of crazy to see this card going for almost $20 Canadian. It says here 12 USD, which is, yeah, kind of ridiculous. Again, called this out a long time ago where I said, and I actually did, I picked up Maui's at around $6 and $7 Canadian, knowing that they were going to go up. Is it the best Ruby card? Maybe. I mean, the price reflects that. It is the most expensive rare. Maleficent Dragons are expensive, but those are, they shifted into the format, they shifted back out. They're kind of all over the place. But I think that these Ruby decks are valuing faster removal and faster play. So Maui will continue to be a threat. I don't see this card getting power corrupt anytime soon. It is very good and will continue to be very good for the foreseeable future. Fishbone Quill being used in every Sapphire application. The only real 2 are Sapphire Ruby and Sapphire Steel. But this card is absolutely skyrocketed in price, especially the foil copies. If you don't have them yet, I mean, you're going to be paying a very high premium for them. Unfortunately, I remember when this card was like $2. But yeah, it's unfortunate to see where they're headed. This card might get power crept eventually, but I think right now it's a decent value. And then finally, Tamatoa here, on the rise a little bit, which has seen application in Sapphire Steel to a certain extent, as well as obviously being played in Sapphire Ruby. This card, again, is something that just gets better over time. It definitely doesn't get power crept, right? You get +1 for each item you have in play and recurs an item on play. Obviously, the biggest sequence that you can do is with a Hierom on board already. Quest with this, get back a Popsicle, play the Popsicle, quest with Hierom, banish the Popsicle, draw 2. Plus you drew 1 off the Popsicle. That's just like infinite draws, really. Does this card continue to have application in Sapphire? I think it does, since Sapphire is heavily focused on items, and they have the card draw engine with the Hierom. This card just naturally fits into almost any Sapphire deck, and I even put 2 in my Sapphire Steel that I was experimenting with as well. Cinderella at an all-time low, really, and I think this card is really undervalued at around $4 or $5. I think it's definitely worth picking up because in the steel mirror matches, this card wins you the game usually. Whoever drops this first is able to really just dominate the board, either take out ready threats or just continue to quest for 3, and it's very hard to out. So Amber Steel Song plays it. Sapphire Steel doesn't necessarily play it right now, but even Amethyst Steel has opted to include this in some capacity to test. The aggro threats, Maleficent biding her time, has definitely been going up as well. Used in Amethyst Steel, not really used in Emerald Steel, but there's no real reason for this to be going up in my opinion, unless you are playing that heavy aggro Amethyst Steel build, but I think that this card probably comes down over time. It just doesn't represent enough value, being only played in one deck that isn't really one of the top decks in the format. And then Lady Tremaine is kind of going back up as people realize that Ruby Amethyst is playing 2 to 3 copies of this again. The quest for 2 has always been relevant. That's why it's better than Medusa in certain applications. But the 3/4 body is still relatively okay, and the fact that you can shift it on top of itself is still pretty relevant to get that slight tempo advantage, and then potentially bounce both back with a Mim card. So if you don't have your Tremaines, maybe look at getting them before they spike back up, because as Floodborn becomes harder to find, this card likely just goes higher and higher in price. So that's going to wrap it up for this interim market watch. If you enjoyed this video, a like would be appreciated. Thank you again for watching. Quantum is out.